All right, so I am going to give you a brief walkthrough of some of the basics of Scratch. And the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go to scratch.mit.edu, and it takes you to the Scratch homepage. And Scratch is a block-based programming language for beginners, but can also be a great tool for even advanced programmers and making fun games that they want to make. So normally someone that's starting off or first starting to program and just learning how to code might choose Scratch as a beginner language or their first language, just playing around when they're in elementary school or middle school or even high school or even as an adult. A lot of people, when they first start off, are a bit intimidated by just coding in general and like having a user-friendly block-based programming language to use. And Scratch is great for that. So the first thing I want you to just bring your attention to is there are three, tabs here at the top that I'm going to briefly talk about. Create, if I were to click create, which I'm going to do last, create takes me right to an area where I can start creating projects. But I'm going to first click on explore. Explore allows you to explore a bunch of different games that have already been created in Scratch. When you create a game or a story or create anything in Scratch, that is then able to be shared to the community. Other people can play the games, other people can add to your game if they want, make comments on it. And it's just a community where you can find all the different games to play. So I have a few in here. I'm going to go ahead and click Pac-Man. That was just one I searched recently, right? So if I were to search Pac-Man, which is a popular game, if I were to look here, all of these different options pop up for Pac-Man. Different people made this game. If I click on this game created by C. Daniels 7088, it takes me to this game. And if I really wanted to, I could click here to make it full screen and then play the game. And I'm using my arrow keys right now to control, and I can move around and play this game. Now, it's not always perfect. Like right here, I'm trying to move and it won't let me. So I guess I got to find another way. But this is a way to create some games or create stories using Scratch. And if I were to click on this button right here, it says see inside, that allows me to see all of the code that the person who developed this put together. And I could scroll through here and see all the blocks that they put together to make this game. I could click on each sprite and look at the blocks that they used. If I really wanted to, I could even remix this game. If I were to click on remix and I don't know, call this Pac-Man remix, I'll say Mr. Danza's Pac-Man remix, right? I could change and edit a few things. It would still be this person's game. Like it would show that this game is remixed by Mr. Danza, but this person created it. I could change up the different blocks and everything in there if I really wanted to, and take this template and move things around. So that's an awesome thing about Scratch too, is when you share your project, other people could make their own versions of your game. So I'm going to go ahead and click Scratch again. If you want to go back to the home page, just click this and it'll take you there. So that's how I would explore. And there's more games, obviously, just than Pac-Man, but you could type in anything you want and see if Scratch has it. The two main reasons why you would ever make something and create and program would be either because it's fun and you just want to create a game, or because you want to create a solution to a problem. And sometimes you're able to get paid to do those things. Other times you just enjoy it. So, and that's totally fine either way. But when you are actually starting to think of ideas of things that you want to do, sometimes it might just be something that you like to do. And sometimes it might be something that is solving a problem, and that solution then is whether it be software or it might even be a game. So from there, I also want to show you what ideas is in the top tab right here. If you click ideas, then is just a list of tutorials that you can look through. So if I click on choose tutorial, there are a bunch of different tutorials that can get you started on a project. A lot of times if you're a beginner and you just say, I don't even know where to start, it might be a good idea to look in the tutorials and just find something of interest. So if I'm just glancing through here, you know, whether you make music, there's a getting started one, creating a story, making a chase game where you're using the arrow keys, whether it be animation, making a character fly, creating a Pong game, whatever it is. There are a bunch of different options in here, just showing you how to do some of the basics. And I could go through and make a tutorial for each one of these, but Scratch has already done that. So I encourage you to, if you're a beginner, looking through some of these tutorials and learning the basics. And then from there, once you learn the basics, you can move on. It's a common saying that you only use 20% of the features 80% of the time. So 80% of the time, if you're just developing and typing code or even just putting blocks together, you might not be using the lesser known or lesser used objects or, I guess, features of the programming language. You might be more focused on the ones that are used much more frequently. And those are the ones you want to know, especially as a beginner. So if you want to learn how to use the arrow keys or animate a sprite, these are all different tutorials that you can go through. And once again, if I click Scratch, it takes me to my home page. So Explore was a bunch of pre-made games you can already look through. Ideas are just some tutorials that you can begin if you're a beginner or just don't know where to start. But I'm going to go ahead and click on Create. Now, I'm already logged into my Scratch account. If you aren't, there should be an option here to sign in or create an account. You can go through and do that. I have a separate video that I'll link to this that you can look through on how to create a Scratch account. But if you click Create, this opens up a new project. And I can tell that I'm logged in because my username is up there in the top right corner. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to reassure you that everything is going to be okay. And I say that when you first look at something, for the very first time, when you look at something, it might be overwhelming. My goal is to help create a comfortability that you can look at this and at least have an idea of what does what. And you might not know everything, but let's focus on the things you're going to use very frequently. So first off, my project doesn't have a name. So I'm going to go ahead and name this project. I'll just say first day, and today's date is September 13th. So I'll just say 9/13/22 because that's today's date. And I just called it that. You can call yours whatever you want. All right. So from here, you may look at the screen and there's really 3 sections that I want to talk about. The first section is over here on the left. Okay. The second section is here in the middle and the third section is here on the right. So left, center, right. If we're looking on the left, first thing I want to point out, these are our drawers and they are color coordinated. So I have a motion drawer, I have a looks drawer, sound, events, control, sensing, operators, variables, and my blocks. And if you're looking at it for the first time, you're looking through this and saying, that's a lot of blocks. Well, imagine that a drawer is a drawer and you open the drawer and there's a bunch of blocks inside of that and each drawer is color coordinated. So this blue drawer that says motion on it, all the blocks that have to deal with motion are inside that drawer. So they're nice and organized for you. You don't have to try and find things, and eventually you'll get used to and remember what color or what drawer they're in. Color coordination is nice. So if we're looking through this, right, you might look through and see all these blocks. Don't worry. I'm going to walk through not each and every one of them, but I'm going to walk through at least some of the basics here in this tutorial to get you started. So whenever you're looking for a block, they're going to be located in these drawers on the left-hand side of the screen. Okay. And if I actually wanted to make my screen do something, if I wanted to make an object do something on my screen, I would drag one of these blocks out to the middle area. And this is where you're actually going to code. This is where your blocks are going to be dropped. So if I were to drag, I don't know, move 10 steps and just drop it right here in the middle, eventually I can drag a ton of blocks, just like as you saw in the Pac-Man game, and piece them all together and create something. So on the left are our drawers. In the middle, that's our development area where we're going to put all of our blocks. And all the way here on the right, this is called our stage. And this is what the user sees, meaning the person who's actually playing the game or using whatever you created. And whenever you are opening up an app on your phone or a program, typically you don't see all the code that happens behind the scenes. You don't see all of this. If we're focused specifically on the user experience and what they see and the interface of what they're dealing with, you're worried more about what's happening on this stage. And right now, front and center on our stage, on our screen, we have Scratch the Cat. And Scratch the Cat is like the mascot of the Scratch programming language. So he's just front and center there, and we're going to talk about him in a minute. But I really want to focus on knowing that there are 3 sections. We have our drawers and our blocks over here. This is where we're going to drag our blocks in our development area. And all the way here on the right is going to be our stage. And there are other things which we'll talk about down here in a second, but it's important that we know where things are, and just becomes a little less intimidating when you know where things are. So with that, I have a sprite here. The sprite is just what Scratch calls objects, and you could have multiple sprites. If you remember in the Pac-Man game, we had Pac-Man, we had all the ghosts, we had all the dots. Those are all different objects that can be interacted with in the game. So a sprite is just another name for an object in the game. If I wanted to delete Scratch the Cat and not have him whatsoever in this game, I could just click that delete button. I guess it was a trash can, but I could just get rid of him. Let's say I don't want to get rid of him and I accidentally click that. I have someone raise their hand and say, Mr. Danza, I can't find what happened to my sprite. No problem. You can click on edit. And then this is like the undo. It will tell you what it's actually doing, but this will restore your sprite that you just deleted. Okay, so let's go ahead and name him. His name's Scratch, so I'm just going to call him Scratch. And if you look here, the X, Y coordinate, if I were to have a coordinate plane, and let's say this is my Y axis going up and down, and this is my X axis going left and right in the middle of that is 0, 0. And if you've taken algebra or geometry, I'm sure you've done some sort of graphing before on a coordinate Cartesian plane, and the 0, 0 is typically right in the middle. Now, some programming languages, 0, 0 is way up here in the top left corner, but right now in Scratch, we have 0, 0 right in the middle, which makes sense. So with that, do realize that if I were to pick up Scratch the Cat and move it over here to the right, the X value goes up, and the Y value, I guess I moved it up a little bit too, so the Y value went up. If I ever want to Scratch to return right to the center of the screen, no worries. I can just type in 0, 0, and he's hanging out in the middle. No matter where I put him, I can always return him in the middle by putting 0, 0. Okay, throughout the game that you make, you might not want Scratch the Cat to actually be seen in the first part of the game. Maybe he's the boss of level 3 and you want him to show up not until level 3, so you can hide him in the background, or you can show him. And there's actually blocks of code which do that as well. but right now we'll start off with him being seen, but you can click between these, whether he's visible or not visible. Okay, the size right now, Scratch is at 100%. If I wanted him to be smaller, let's say 50%, notice he's now 50%, or even smaller, I could add him to like 10%. Look how small he is. If I want him back at 100%, type in 100, or if I wanted him at 200%, he's a lot bigger. So that number, 100% of the size, there you go, there's Scratch. Also the direction that Scratch the cat is facing, you can change that. Right now he's at a 90-degree angle, but if I wanted to move him to 180, he's facing down. -90, he's facing upside down to the left, and then 0, he's facing up. So if I wanted to, I'm just going to leave him at 90, but if I wanted him, let's say he's moving around throughout the game, if I ever want him to be upside down, I would make sure to leave all around. If I only want him to move left and right, let's say gravity exists and we know that he'll never end up being upside down, then I want to make sure that I'm clicking left, right. Okay, left, right, make sure he only moves left and right and he doesn't actually get upside down at any point. Do not rotate. Make sure that he's just always facing in this direction. If I always want him to face 90 degrees, if he were to walk across the screen and let's say we wanted him to walk back the other way, he would still be facing that direction the entire time. He would never actually rotate the other way. So you could choose, I'm just going to leave to the default, which is all around. So that is some of the properties of this sprite right here. And I could add multiple sprites. We'll go through in further tutorials and I'll explain how to add different functionality to different sprites. But I'll go through briefly in this one, but not extensively. So your stage, if you wanted to change what's on your stage, so I don't know, let's say I wanted to choose a backdrop. I could click back here where it says choose a backdrop. And I don't know, let's say I just want him in the Arctic. These are some pre-made ones. So if I were to just hover over, I could choose one. I could draw my own by clicking paint. I could click a random one. Surprise just gives you a random backdrop. Or I could upload one. If it's one that I've created or one I've downloaded from the internet, you can put your own backdrops back there. And the same goes for sprites. If I wanted to choose a sprite, I could add other sprites. So I could choose one of my own. I could draw one of my own. I could just pick a random one or upload one that I've either already created or one that's on the internet. So with that, let's just say I want to choose another sprite and I'll just choose this bear here and put it right on top of Scratch. I'll move him down here, but it just says his name is Bear. I could change his name if I wanted to. I'm not going to, but we have Scratch and we have this bear over here, just quite bigger than the Scratch. So with that, you can add multiple sprites. And I think more importantly, we can look at the code. Notice that when I had Scratch up right here in the middle, his block that I dragged over here is there. But if I click on the bear, there's no block there. It's because they each have their own blocks. So if I click back on Scratch, what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and make Scratch move 10 steps. And since Scratch is an event-based language and it waits for things to happen, typically you want to start something by looking in this events drawer. And when I look in here, the very top one, it says when the green flag is clicked. So when the green flag is clicked, typically that's how you start a game. If you remember in Pac-Man, the way we started the game was by clicking that green flag that was on the screen. So when the game starts, that's when the green flag is clicked. So whenever I click the green flag, the game starts. And this is saying when the green flag is clicked, something happens. If I just drag these blocks on the screen and then click the green flag, nothing happens because nothing is connected to this. If I actually want Scratch the Cat to move 10 steps, I have to drag and drop it right there where it says, when the green flag is clicked, move 10 steps. So right now, if I pick it up and move it, notice how it moves together. And if I really want Scratch to move 10 steps, I now have to click the green flag. So I'm going to click it in 3 seconds, and I want you to watch very closely what Scratch does. I'm doing it in 3, 2, 1, and go. He moved 10 steps. Now let's take a look again. Ready? 1, 2, and 3. So notice that he didn't actually pick his feet up and move 10 physical steps that we think of when we think of taking a step, but it's really moved 10 spaces. So in this case right here, it's moved 10 spaces, in this case, 10 spaces to the right. So the X value has increased by 10. So really, this should really say move 10 spaces. When you say move 10 steps, sometimes people think that it's actually going to take those steps. We can make it do that eventually, but right now we're mainly focused on this right here. And this number doesn't have to be 10. If we want it to move, I don't know, 50 steps, I'm going to click it in 3, 2, 1. Notice he moved a lot more. Or if I were to say 200 steps, ready, 3, 2, 1. Notice how he just kind of jumps across the screen. So no matter what number we put in there, that's how many steps he's going to take. And if I were to click on the bear, notice that all the blocks disappear. Sometimes I have someone raise their hand and say, Mr. Danza, I don't know what happened to the blocks that I created for one sprite. Well, really, you have to click on that sprite in order to see the blocks. So with that, when the green flag's clicked, move 10 steps. That's not the only block. You can play around and maybe add other blocks in there if you really want to. Move 15 degrees. You're not going to, when you first start learning this, you're not going to get comfortable with these until you actually use them and you learn what they do. So something that I would recommend is, well, first disclaimer, you're not going to break the game because one, this is just a fun environment. I just wrote first day 9/13/2022. That's the name of my project. I'm not trying to create something super sophisticated. If you create a project like this, your very first one, play around with these blocks, pick random blocks, drag them and drop them in and see what happens. That's the way you're going to learn. You can listen to me talk as much as you want, but the real way you're going to learn is by trying things out, messing up, and then realizing what you did and then moving forward. Now, I can help guide you. I can help give you some of the basics, but really, if you're really interested in this, you're going to try each and every block and see what it does. I'm not going to spend the time using each and every block here in this tutorial, but I don't know if you pick a random one, let's say go to a random position when the green flag is clicked. If I were to click it, notice Scratch goes to a random position. And let's say I click on the bear and I drag out when the green flag is clicked. Actually, I'll choose a different one. I'll say when the space key is pressed, I want him to turn 15 degrees. Let's move back here. So if I go to the beginning, if I click the green flag, Scratch goes to a random position. If I click the space bar, the bear moves 15 degrees. The more I click it, he spins around, and eventually I'm going to try and get him back to the way he's supposed to be. There you go. So each sprite has their own blocks that I can play with. And the way, as I mentioned, the way you're going to get better at this is just by looking through each of these drawers and trying things out, dragging and dropping them in there. So this is your code up here. If you want to look at the different costumes of Scratch, the different ways that Scratch the Cat can look, I can click here. I can edit the costume. These are 2 costumes that I could use for him. And then also, if I wanted to add sounds, I could do that too. I can talk more about that in another tutorial, but just looking through this from a brief perspective here, if you ever want to share your project, you can click share, and that will allow you to share it. If you ever just want to make sure that it saves, I can click File, Save Now, and it saves all of my changes. If I want to add more drawers, there are additional drawers down here in the bottom left-hand corner. And I don't know if you want to make music, if you want text to speech, if you want a pen where you can draw things, and you have different add-ons here with Legos, you can use that as well. But you can connect that and add different drawers. I guess I'll show you one, for example. If I don't know, click here, text to speech, I now have access to that. So these are just like drawers that aren't as frequently used that you can open up if you really want to. And now notice text to speech is on here, just to save space and for not you to become too confused, especially if it's your first time doing this. Also down at the bottom, if you wanted to move, I have a bunch of things in my backpack down here, but your backpack is an area that if you want to copy blocks over to another sprite, I could go ahead and just like pick this up and drop it in my backpack. And that allows me to copy it. And then if I click on the bear, and let's say I go to my backpack here and I drag out what was in my backpack, when the green flag is clicked, go to random position, now it's the same. Okay. If I ever want to, let's say I don't want when spacebar is clicked and I don't want this anymore, I can go ahead and just drag it and just drop it back in the drawer and it disappears. So I don't have that anymore. So now every time the green flag is clicked, both sprites are going to move to a random position. All right. Also, let me go back to Scratch. If I right click on this, an easy way to duplicate this if I wanted to and just copy blocks. Let's say I have a bunch of blocks that are all connected. I could duplicate it just by right clicking and click duplicate. Another way to delete it, I know I mentioned dropping it in the drawer, but if I right click and click delete block, that deletes that. Or I can drag it back, either way. Okay. The green flag starts things, and if a game's going on and you want to stop, you can click the stop sign there. All right, so just some of the basics to get you started. If you're interested in more and other tutorials, I have a bunch here in Scratch and other block-based programming languages just to get you started. But hopefully this at least sets the stage for you to become a little bit more comfortable with some of the features. I encourage you, and I can't say this enough, the way you're going to learn is by trying things, not getting it right the first time, and then seeing how to fix it, trying and messing around. I don't want you to get too confused, but this is a perfect playground, an area, a project for you to create just to play around and add different things in here and see what they do. So in any programming language, when you're first starting off, it can be intimidating, but you're going to find a lot of success the more that you play around with different blocks in Scratch and seeing exactly what they do. So in all the drawers, I'd recommend dragging them out, looking through them, or watching more tutorials. So I hope this was informative, and I hope that you have a great first time coding in Scratch.